Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. I went back in time to 2015, so like not crazy long ago, but I grabbed a Wesley versus a Shakhriyar Mamedyarov game, and this is the first time that they met over the board in a tournament. So, as always, my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na aking makaibigan. Magandang umaga. Magandang upon if you see this in the afternoon. It is a little bit late there. It's late here too. I wasn't sure if I was going to get a video done today. I tried really hard, so here it is. Really looking forward to tomorrow. Hopefully it's some really good chess and some, there's a lot of attention, being put towards the tournament. As you guys know, the Champions Chess Tour is coming to its conclusion tomorrow with the finals. So all of the tournaments that we've had pretty much since I started my YouTube last September is coming to the point tomorrow. Starting anyway. I appreciate you guys very much. Messiah Komakita Kangmuli, hello you lit. For everybody in the Philippines, anybody who is coming from Azerbaijan, I will say salam to you and chak sagol. I appreciate you guys very much for coming by. I think that's all I had. I don't think I had anything else in Azerbaijan. Maybe I learned something else. No. Yes. No. That's Armenian. Okay. All right. I was thinking maybe I had another phrase, but I don't. Maybe I'll get one. Anyway, if you guys are ready to go, I definitely know at least one person in the world that's kind of like this game. And he knows why. It's crazy. It was just random. It was random. I didn't search for what you're about to see. It's just, here it is. So let's go ahead and get rolling. So we have D4, D5, C4, and then we have C6. So this is a Slav. Like I said, I was just going through looking at major names, and I came across Mamedyarov. And so I was like, man, let me go ahead and get a Wesley versus Mamedyarov game real quick. And this is their first ever meeting, and there is a Slav on the board. So like I said, I at least know one person that's happy in the world, and you know who you are. Anyways, we see knight to f3. We got knight to f6. Knight comes to c3. So this is all like really typical development. It is actually going to be a very long time until we get to the novelty. So be patient on that one. Pawn takes c4, and we do have a4. Now, there are a few different ways that you can actually play this position after you get to this point. The best way by far is going to be a4 because you just want to directly stop b5 from coming so that you definitely have time to push to like, e3 or e4 and go ahead and grab that pawn back. And there's not any type of, issues. If you do push e4 first, you are going to see b5. Bishop could come to e2. Maybe something like b4, knight comes to a4. You are going to be getting your pawn back, but, you're kind of getting knocked around just a little bit. So like I said, a4 is definitely the best to play to start off with. After we see bishop to f5, we see knight to e5. And this is also a common way of getting the pawn back. There are typically around 3 different ways when you play any Slav-like structure or like Catalan or, any type of like Queen's Gambit decline situation to get this pawn back. It's either pushing the e-pawn to get it out of the way for the bishop. Sometimes you can see queen coming to c2 and snapping the pawn that way, or even queen to a4. But knight to e5 is going to be a very common way to just kind of like swoop back and grab this pawn. And a4, like I said, makes b5, pretty dumb because you're just going to be taking it immediately and you're going to be winning a pawn. So you definitely don't want to do that as black. But we do see knight b to d7, and then the knight comes back over to c4 to get the pawn. Queen comes to c7, and then we do see g3. E5 comes. We got pawn takes e5, knight takes e5, and then the immediate pin of bishop to f4. And this actually can be kind of annoying. It's not so annoying because we do have knight f to d7, taking care of the pin. Bishop comes to g2, and we do see the very aggressive g5. As I said in the previous video, if your piece is attacked, you always do want to try to look for, a very good square for the piece to go to, like an attacking type of square, maybe even place a counterattack type situation. But Definitely something else that you should be looking for is a Zwischenzug move, which for those of you that aren't familiar, it is an in-between type of move. It's not the expected move. It is expected after black attacks your pawn, your piece, that you're just going to move it. But it's not expected that you go knight to e3. And this is exactly what Wesley so does. And this is actually the best move in the position. So after knight comes to e3, you see pawn takes f4. Knight takes f5. You see long castles by black. And this is pretty, this is setting up a nice little discovery here. So you definitely have to pay attention to that. So queen comes to c2, which in all of these different structures, I mean, you usually are looking at a queen coming to c2. Catalans, Slavs, queen gambit decline type stuff. We do see knight to c5. We got castles by white. Pawn takes g3. And then it is always typically recommended that you do take capture towards the center. It's not a automatic, but in this particular situation, it does make more sense to go ahead and take on g3. We do see a5, making sure that we don't have any like further expansion up here. If we do get this pawn to a5, you definitely can see some knight to a4s, knight coming up to b6. And so, we're definitely not trying to be inconvenienced that way. We do see rook f to d1. We got h5. Rook takes d8. Queen takes d8. And then we do see rook to d1. And queen comes over to f6. So both players have pretty much done everything they needed to do. They've developed their pieces, except you do have this bishop still kind of hanging out on its home square here. So black definitely has a move that they need to make with their piece. And they are coming under fire because bishop comes to h3. And this can be some pretty nasty discoveries if you are not careful. So king sidesteps over to b8. If your opponent has a dark square bishop, it is usually recommended that you put your king on a dark square because, there just isn't any tactics available. So you're pretty secure in that. And so we see queen over to d2. Bishop comes to e7. And then we have actually reached a point in the game that if you do want to pause the video and see what Wesley So plays here, it is by far the best move in the position. And there's pretty much a couple different reasons why you play this move. So like I said, pause the video and try to guess this really nice move by Wesley So. Okay, cool. So there's a couple things that you should notice in this position. Number one, the knight is hitting this bishop. And there is a nice way to put further pressure on this bishop and also sneak an attack on this knight, if you can successfully remove this bishop. And it is actually queen to e3. Now, attacking the knight on c5 is actually kind of just a dream because, I mean, in most of the situations, if, white takes here, the queen is going to take back, renewing that here. But at the same time, the queen is going to be putting themselves in the pin. After f4, it's going to be a little bit inconvenient. The knight was going to have to probably back up here. So, it can get kind of dicey. But queen to e3, it improves the position of the queen, and it also further centralizes the queen, so it's all good. Knight does come back to g6 just to simply protect this bishop. And then we do see rook up to d4, and this is the novelty of the game. 23 moves in, and we have just gotten to the novelty. So that is not something that you always see. The novelty usually comes a little bit earlier than that. But we do have rook to d4, the novelty move 23. So we do see knight coming back to e6, and it gets real dicey when we get into this position here. We have the knight backing up, attacking this rook. And then we have a counter attack, another Zwischenzug move after knight comes to e4, and this does attack the queen. Of course, like if this rook wasn't double defended, the queen could just simply snap it off the board, but the knight is holding it. So everything is, kind of going, white's way. And if black is not careful, they are going to get in a very bad position. So we do see queen to e5, which is the best possible move. There really wasn't any other moves. You can't go here. You can't go here. You can't go here. So, I mean, it's the only move. It's the only move that saves you, but it's kind of like the most obvious move to make. So queen goes to e5. We see rook up to d7, putting a rook on the 7th and double attacking this bishop. We do see rook over to d8. We see queen over to d3. Now, something that was actually really strong in the position was actually rook takes d8 with check. And then after bishop taking d8, knight f goes to d6. Knight comes over to g5, and this is placing, like a little attack on this knight, but also threatening this bishop. And so white would literally not care about any of this and go just back to g2. Knight would take e4, knight would take f7, queen would come back to e7, knight would take on d8, knight comes back to c8, and then you sneak the queen just ever so gently next to that knight. After queen takes, you have queen takes, and I mean, you are actually up a pawn. So, I mean, you might have a little something going on there. After rook to d8, you actually did have the ability to play f4 as well. And this puts black in kind of a jam because you really only have queen takes b2 and queen back to h8. And if the queen does take on b2, either one of those scenarios, you're going to be losing a piece. You're going to be getting a pawn or two maybe. Knight would take on e7. You would allow rook to take on d7. Knight would take on g6, and then the rook would come down to place a check on d1. King would come up to f2. We see knight back to c7, and then knight comes to e5. And as you can see, white is up some material. So like I said, this particular position does get very dicey. So like I said, after we had rook to d8, we did see queen over to d3. And this, puts the game in more or less equality. Rook takes on d7. We see queen takes d7, queen takes e4. Knight takes e7, knight takes e7, queen takes e7, queen takes e2. And we do see queen takes f7. So everything gets into fair equality. We do have 4 pawns for each side. We have the pawn majority over here and then the lonely pawn over here. So, we definitely have to make sure that we're being careful that f4, f5, f6 doesn't start coming. So we do see queen to d1 with check. Bishop comes down to f1. We see knight down to d4. And then we do see queen to f8 with check. King comes down to c7. Queen comes to e7 with check. King comes up to c8. Queen goes back to f8 with check. King comes back down to c7. Queen comes to e7 with check. King goes up to c8. Queen goes up to e8 with check. King comes to c7. And then we have queen back to e7. And we do have a draw by 3-fold repetition. As you can see, we have seen the king and the queen be on c7 and e7 respectively 3 times. And so going back, after queen took, let's just kind of cycle back through. Okay. After bishop comes down to f1, knight comes down to d4. I mean, it's not, I think maybe Wesley So might have thought the position was kind of scary. There isn't really a lot that, black can do. I mean, black can always check here, which forces the king up. You can also check here, forces the king up. But there really isn't, like a good penetration that's going on. This bishop is actually doing a really great job of taking care of all of the light squares for the king. So, this pawn isn't really going anywhere. So, I mean, the position is actually held pretty well by, white. So, there really isn't much better. All the 4 moves that I'm seeing in this particular position, they give triple zeros. So, I mean, there are so many different ways that you can just pretty much draw. Either side is pretty much going to be checking the other side. One side would have to just horribly blunder to, kind of put the situation in a bad spot. But that is that game. So I'm going to go ahead and get these good mornings real quick, and then I'm going to head out. So, maayong buntag, mayad na agahan, naimbeg na bigat, masanto siya kabason, marhe na aga. Buenos dias, maayong aga, mapia na uma, kapian kapon of Dios, mayad na aga, I think. Yes, but mayapa abak. Let me see. It's been a minute since I've done these. Mapia agay, mapia kapa pizza, my big bukla, marjana buntag, maria may not, maupena aga, kasan yang gansi alabi. Salam, assalamu alaikum, merci, maraming salamat po aking makaibigan, po sa nanunood, and Chuck Sago for coming by and taking a look at my stuff. I've covered everybody. Appreciate everybody very much. Hopefully the video does look a little bit better. I'll put a little bit more lighting in here, so it looks to me like it's a little bit better. So hopefully it does come out better. So, until I get a studio or an entire room devoted to my my recording, I think this is looking pretty good. So I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by, and I'll see y'all next time.